guys, it's Kayla here. Welcome back to my channel. I am doing a video on 1984. Kind of like a book review. I finished reading this. It has 326 pages, but of actual story, 297 pages. This book is a bit battered up, but I finished it. It's dystopian fiction and science fiction. So that's the genre. This is a genre that I don't usually read, or that I don't usually have any interest in reading. I'm personally not too crazy about like dystopian worlds or like futuristic kind of books, or books where like government is like really different and awful and controlling, and the future is weird. I usually don't like books like that. They just don't usually capture my interest. But this one's different. So this was published in 1949. So I'm going to start off with a little book summary that I got on Goodreads. I'm awful at summarizing things, so I'm going to let Goodreads do it. 1984 is a rare work that grows more haunting as its futuristic purgatory becomes more real. Published in 1949, the book offers political satirist George Orwell's nightmarish vision of totalitarian, bureaucratic world and one poor stiff's attempt to find individuality. The brilliance of the novel is Orwell's prescience of modern life, the ubiquity of television, the distortion of the language, and his ability to construct such a thorough vision of hell. Required reading for students since it was published, it ranks among the most terrifying novels ever written. Accurate. Totally accurate. Overall, I really liked it. I didn't think I was going to at all because of, like I said, I'm not crazy about this kind of genre, and I actually thought it was going to be harder to read, more vague ideas, harder to read, harder to get into, but it was none of those things. The book is divided into 3 parts. The third part is by far the most exciting. So yeah, it was really easy to follow. I wouldn't call it a page turner, but it wasn't boring either. It's very simplistic, and it kept my interest, which surprised me from the very beginning. The writing is good. It's good writing. I wouldn't necessarily call it beautiful. There are parts in this book where there are some lines or some quotes that are beautiful. Sadly enough and crazily enough, the entire time I was reading this, I kept thinking of North Korea, life in North Korea, because as creepy as it sounds, this reminds me a lot of North Korea, a lot of the stuff that North Korea goes through, the control, the propaganda, and like the fear that runs the country. Like, if you've read this, you probably know what I'm talking about. So I did like that there were some moments in this novel where true beauty kind of shined through, humanity, because this book is lacking a lot of humanity. It's kind of weird to say, but like, I wouldn't call these people robots, but they're very harsh and unfeeling, and they're not very compassionate to each other. So, but there are a few moments or a few times where you see that come through, and so it kind of gives you hope that the government doesn't completely control everyone and everything, and that you can still be an individual and still be human. Overall, the book is frustrating and stressful and terrifying because the people in this book, they're not free. They are greatly oppressed and controlled by the government. There are times throughout this book when I was reading it that I was just getting so angry at just how little freedom they had, and little individualism. Like, they just don't have. It just made me really grateful for living in the United States and living in a country where freedom is like, I am free, and I'm free to express myself however I want and do whatever I want. And these people, they can't even think the way that they want. Like, it's crazy. The good thing is I don't think society will ever end up exactly like this, at least not in the US, because I mean, it's kind of already happening in North Korea, but I don't think this will ever happen in the US. God bless America. I know that there are people that probably think, oh, it could happen, and I mean, like, yeah, like literally it's possible, but it's not possible. Like, it's not gonna happen. Thank God. But it is a warning. It does feel like a warning. Like, be careful how much trust you put in the government, and be careful with Big Brother. Like, that's a Big Brother plays a huge part in this book of like technology, like watching you, watching every one of your movements and what you do and what you say. And they're trying so hard in this book to be able to read your mind. Like, in many ways, I guess that they can. It doesn't really clarify how. There's a part in here where this guy is talking about how they are trying so many different like experiments and testing and putting all this money trying to figure out how to read people's minds. And that is terrifying. I don't think that'll ever happen, but I know, like, I remember seeing some clips on TV, like on the news, about, you know, students at like MIT or just people that they're experimenting and trying to build things or kind of ways to read your mind. Like, that's kind of, or to use your mind to control things. I don't know, it's really creepy. So I mean, that's a little worrisome, but I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime, thank God. So I remember when I was 15, I was looking at this table of used books and I saw this copy, and it was for like $1 or like 50 cents or something crazy, and I didn't want to read it then, but I knew that it was famous. I knew it was popular. I knew that it was one of those books that people are like, you have to read this before you die, you know? So I was like, I'll buy it, you know, maybe I'll read it someday. And I honestly thought, and actually never really thought I would. I'm gonna go into stuff that I didn't like about this book. One thing that I thought this book fell a little short of was the whole concept of the thought police. So the thought police in this book plays a big role. Like, I don't know, like from the very beginning, they talk about Big Brother and the government and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I get it. But thought police, like, they made it seem from the beginning that people can read your mind, or that the government can read your mind, or something can read your mind, and that you have to be so careful of what you think, because people will come and they will take you, and they will, rumor has it, you know, they'll take you away and they'll torture you and kill you, and then that's it. So you have to be super careful. Like, you can't think any thoughts that are individualistic or that goes against the party, the government. But they never really elaborate too much on it. They don't really go into detail of like how it works, how it came to be, who is the thought police, how do they read your mind. Like, nothing. You really don't get that. Like, it's weird. Like, I thought that was going to play a bigger role. More towards the end, we do hear a little bit about it as far as like testing, and then all of a sudden you kind of think like, oh, maybe they don't really have it all down to a science, like, because they're still trying to figure out how to really read people's minds. And I'm just like, well, I thought that you could. But I think that it was more just like they were paying hard attention to your facial expressions and the tone of your voice and where you looked at. Like, the tiniest expression can be enough for like the thought police to come and take you, because based on the way your face looks or something, that means you're thinking something that's not good. So that was a little disappointing. I kind of wanted more of the thought police to like tell me more about it. Sometimes I didn't like Winston or Julia's thought processes. Like, their thoughts sometimes were really like violent and cruel and very lacking of humanity. I also felt that there were some racist undertones to this novel. I mean, I know it was written in 1948, and I don't know, I can't tell if he was like truly racist or if these are just terms that are outdated and right now they're racist, but back then they weren't, or they were, but no one cared, or people cared, but you know what I mean. So there's some weird racist stuff that the way he calls Asian people Mongols. Like, I don't know if that's right. I don't know. And there's some sexism in here, but very little. I found that more at the beginning. So I mean, there's a little, but I kind of figure like it was written in 1948. Another thing that kind of drove me a little crazy, but it is a very popular aspect of this book, is the idea of newspeak. So language plays a big role in this book as well, and I think that goes hand in hand with the whole propaganda thing. You know, words are powerful, And in this society, Newspeak is like a new language, and the government is working on it. They're trying to teach everybody Newspeak, which is basically a watered down version of English. It's a language that takes out all individuality. So like there are no words that exist that can harm the party or anything like that. And it's very childish to me. Like the words that they come up with for Newspeak is just so, it seems very childish, very like not creative. It sounds really stupid to me. I'll see if I can find some words and like why it sounds stupid. Oh, you know what? And there's a whole section in the back of the book called The Principles of Newspeak. When they called regular English old speak. Okay, so I don't know if this will help, but I'm gonna read this little excerpt. In addition, any word, this again applied in principle to every word in the language, could be negatived by adding the affix un, or could be strengthened by the affix plus, or for still greater emphasis, double plus. Thus, for example, uncold meant warm, while plus cold and double plus cold meant respectively very cold and superlatively cold. Like, the words are so stupid. I just can't. God. It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. Of course, the great wastage is in the verbs and adjectives, but there are hundreds of nouns that can be got rid of as well. It isn't only the synonyms, there are also the antonyms. After all, what justification is there for a word which is simply the opposite of some other words? A word contains its opposite in itself. Take good, for instance. If you have a word like good, what need is there for a word like bad? Ungood will do just as well, better, because it's an exact opposite, which the other is not. Or again, if you want a stronger version of good, what sense is there in having a whole string of vague, useless words like excellent and splendid, and all the rest of them? Plus good covers the meaning, or double plus good if you want something stronger still. Of course, we use these forms already, but in the final version of Newspeak, there will be nothing else. In the end, the whole notion of goodness and badness will be covered by only 6 words, and reality only 1 word. Like, do you see what I mean? It's just weird. I get what they're saying, and I get why he's writing it, and I get it, but it sounds stupid. And there are words that are used throughout this book that are Newspeak, like Newspeak, and they just like combine a bunch of words together. Doublethink, plus good, ungood, like just ugh. But I guess the whole point is that the way they're crafting this language is that once everybody speaks Newspeak, there won't even be words that will threaten the party, the government. There won't be words available to express individuality. They won't exist. They won't leave them there. They'll only use words that are very like literal and that are only in the party's best interest. Like the government even says that. So that's crazy. It's freaky and terrifying, but it really shows like how powerful words are, and that plays a huge role in this book. One interesting thing about this book that I feel like when I was thinking about like how I felt about this book after I finished reading it, I was like, I feel like there are really only 3 characters in this book. We encounter lots of people in the book. There are times where we go along with the main character. His name's Winston Smith. We go along with him to work and, out and about on the streets, and he meets people and talks to people he knows. He's in a cafeteria with a bunch of people. Like, you get the sense that there's people everywhere, like it's a city. But as far as like really getting to know characters, I feel like there's only 3 that you even know remotely about, because the way that people interact with each other in this book is like you don't even know each other. Like, you might know each other's names, but you know nothing else, because either on the outside you're just like a raging fanatic of the party, like everyone has to be a raging fanatic, loyal person to the party, and you can't be anything else. So, you get the sense that everybody is fake, and everybody, like, there's no individuality. You just can't tell anyone apart from each other, except for these 3 people in this book. One is Winston, The other one is Julia, who is like his love interest. And then the third one is O'Brien. It was a really good book. It made me mad and frustrated. It was written in 1948. So, I mean, it's totally ahead of its time. It's still very relevant, which is creepy, especially with the whole Big Brother thing. I'm definitely glad I read it. It wasn't hard to read. It wasn't boring. It wasn't a page turner, but it was really good. So I loved it. I liked the book. I wouldn't say that I loved it. I liked it. And I have respect for it. I definitely would recommend this book. I definitely recommend you to read it, even if this isn't up your alley, because this kind of book is not up my alley. But I enjoyed it, and I had a respect for it, and I can understand it, and I can respect it for what it is, and appreciate it for what it is. Okay, so I wanted to say some fun facts about 1984. George Orwell, who's the author, he worked for the British government during World War II as a propagandist at BBC. This no doubt influenced the book. Propaganda plays a huge role in the book, so I mean, it's kind of crazy. Orwell had a few different names for this novel. He first wanted to call it like 1980, and then he wanted to call it 1982 before he finally settled on calling it 1984. Since it was written in 1948, some people think that it was his idea to just invert the numbers of 4 and 8, switch them around. So instead of 1948, it's 1984. But we don't really know. And then he also considered calling the book The Last Man in Europe. The whole time that he was writing 1984, George Orwell was battling tuberculosis. Like, he was really sick. A friend of his basically let him borrow his home in Scotland to write his book. And so he goes there, but the whole time he's just like super sick. And at this time there was no cure for tuberculosis, so he suffered a lot, but he wrote through it. But ultimately the disease took his life 7 months after 1984 was published. So yeah, he didn't live very long after this book was published. There's a lot of famous quotes and stuff from the book and ideas from the book, and one of them is 2 + 2 = 5. This is like it plays a big role in the book, and it's basically just saying, like, you are gonna believe what we tell you to believe. There's a part where Winston is being tortured, and O'Brien's asking him, like, Winston, what is 2 + 2? And Winston's like, 4. Like, it's 4. And O'Brien's like, no, it's 5. Basically just making the point, like, even if it doesn't make sense to you, you're gonna believe what we say. And it's just freaky. It's just like, and that's something that kind of goes throughout the whole book. It's really freaky. The slogan 2 + 2 = 5 originated from Russia, where the communist regime used it as a motto of sorts in an effort to help them accomplish the goals of their 5-year plan in only 4 years. So it didn't have the same meaning. Orwell didn't coin it, but he borrowed it. And another interesting fact about this book is that it makes the list of the world's top 10 most frequently banned books. This book has been banned, is banned in lots of places. It's one of those books because it's really controversial, you know, it's very controversial. So I thought that's kind of interesting. I also wanted to say a little bit about the author, George Orwell. His real name is Eric Arthur Blair. I'm just like, what? His name's not George Orwell. I mean, it's not surprising, like, lots of authors have pen names, but I was just like, George Orwell seems like a real name. It doesn't seem like a pen name, but whatever. He was an English author and journalist. He's marked by keen intelligence and wit, a profound awareness of social injustice, and an intense opposition to totalitarianism, a passion for clarity in language, and a belief in democratic socialism. So you can see a lot of that stuff in his book. In addition to his literary career, Orwell served as a police officer with the Indian Imperial Police in Burma from 1922 to 1927, and he fought with the Republicans in the Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1937. Orwell was severely wounded when he was shot through his throat. Between 1941 and 1943, Orwell worked on propaganda for the BBC. In 1943, he became literary editor of the Tribune, a weekly left-wing magazine. He was a prolific polemical journalist, article writer, literary critic, reviewer, poet, and writer of fiction, and considered perhaps the 20th century's best chronicler of English culture. Orwell is best known for the dystopian novel 1984 and the satirical novella Animal Farm. They have together sold more copies than any two books by any other 20th century author. Orwell's influence on contemporary culture, popular and political, continues decades after his death. Several of his neologisms, along with the term Orwellian, now a byword for any oppressive or manipulative social phenomenon opposed to a free society, have entered the vernacular. And I got that from Goodreads as well. And just some other notable works from this author. Animal Farm, that was published in 1945. That's probably his other way famous book. I think it's a common read that you have to read in some schools. I never had to read it in school, so that's definitely on my list. I do want to read it because I've heard many things about it. He also wrote Homage to Catalonia in 1938, Keep the Aspidistra Flying in 1936, and Down and Out in Paris and London in 1933. So those are just some of his other notable works. So yeah, that's my review on 1984. I liked it. As far as a rating, I would give it 3 out of 5 stars because it's not my favorite book. It wasn't awful. I wouldn't call it a 4, but it wasn't bad either. So that's not a bad rating. It's just not my cup of tea. You know, there are people out there who have more interests maybe in, like, I'm not crazy about politics or government or anything like that, but people out there who do have interests like that, they might think this is amazing, you know what I mean? Because that's right up their alley. So it has no bearing on the book. Like, the book is written really well, crazy ideas, awesome ideas. It's a super sad, frustrating, crazy book. I get why it's a classic. I get why it's relevant. Like, it's important. Like, I do think that, I really do think you should read it. It's not hard to read, and it's one of those very thought-provoking things, you know, and it does make you think about your own society, and it's scary. It is scary. Like, it's terrifying when you have to think of things like that happening with your government, your own, you know, nation. It's terrifying. So I think that's probably why I stay away from books like this, because it's scary. But anyways, that is my review of 1984. Let me know if you've ever read it, what you think about it, you know, your opinions, your thoughts, what you think about this review, whatever. I just definitely had to make a review on it because it's 1984 and I liked it. I'm glad I read it. So, yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in my next video.